So for everybody who's listening, there's been a little bit of change as far as who is on the panel. Initially, Christina Pushaw was supposed to be on, but she is still traveling, so she's not able to make it. But we still have a great panel. Um, Libby Emmons will be coming later on. She just has to fulfill an obligation, but she'll be joining us in the conversation later. Um, Before we get going, I just want to introduce, or actually let everybody introduce themselves. Um, we'll start with the Mythinformed guys. You want to introduce yourselves?
Yeah, sure. So we're Mythinformed MKE, which is it stands for Mythinformed Milwaukee. It's the airport code. Everyone kind of thinks it's Mythinformed Mike, but it's two of us, Brian and Sean. So that's what we do. We're a nonprofit in Milwaukee, and we talk a lot about kind of rigid ideologies and how they're creeping into different places.
Yeah, Adam, thanks for having us. Christina Pushaw was like super exciting. I was like, oh man, like she's doing such a fantastic job with DeSantis. That was really really exciting. Maybe next time she'll be on. We love her. She's
Yeah,
fantastic.
hopefully next time something relevant we'll be talking about, we can do this kind of thing again with her.
Yeah.
Batya, you want to introduce yourself?
Sure. My name is Batya Ungar-Sargon, and I am the Deputy Opinion Editor of Newsweek and also Adam's editor, because we have the privilege of having run, I think, 2 op-eds by Adam at this point, both of which are brilliant, and you guys should go immediately and check them out as soon as we're done here. I am also the author of a book called Bad News: How Woke Media is Undermining Democracy, that gets at a lot of, I think, the why behind why our media is so terrible right now, and also why I think Adam's voice is so important.
All right, and thank you for introducing yourself. And last but not least, Edgar, if you want to introduce yourself.
Well, my name is Edgar Beltran. I am from Venezuela. I live in Venezuela. I am the deputy editor of El American, which, if you might not know us, we are the first bilingual in English. We're published in English and Spanish, conservative outlet in the U.S. And we've been working for around a year and a half or so, and forming a lot of alliances and trying to defend freedom out there for Latinos in the U.S. and trying to spread some truths that are not normally said in the Spanish media in the U.S., that it's ruled by liberal media like Univision and Telemundo, but we'll talk about it a bit later.
Okay, great. And for anybody who's not familiar with me, my name is Adam Coleman. I'm the author of a book called Black Victim to Black Victor, which gives social commentary along with telling my personal story. I am also the founder of Wrong Speak Publishing. It's a website dedicated to free speech with intellectual thought. It's kind of the mantra I'm going for. So if anybody ever wants to write for it, feel free to contact me. So it's not just for myself; it's for other people to have a voice and express themselves. And this is what I call a good faith space, which basically every week, every Wednesday at 7:30 p.m., I have conversations about different topics. Some topics I'm somewhat ignorant on, and I want to talk to people who may be more familiar about it, or just have a genuine conversation about things that we don't necessarily talk about too often. So today we're talking about media manipulation and false narratives. So I'll start by saying one of the, and excuse my voice, I'm getting over I got the coof, probably have the coof. So I'm just getting over it. But one of the wake up calls for me within the past few years had to be when I realized that the media was lying, overtly lying. And I asked the question not too long ago, a few hours ago, has the media always been filled with elitists who despise us? Or is this something that's new? As someone who, I will admit, I was more liberal-minded, who had almost like a blind faith within in the media, especially television, watch MSNBC's, CNN, and I believed the information that they were telling me. And, maybe in some ways I was a lazy viewer, and, that's something to discuss, but I believed them. And I think there are millions of Americans who feel the same way, who believe that the professionals, the experts are telling us the truth, and there would be no reason for them to lie. There would be no reason for them to set a particular narrative. And one of the things I had to experience was the lies about Donald Trump, the lies about a whole slew of things about people in general, the type of people who disagree on certain viewpoints. Um, and I had to basically turn off the television and start meeting these people and start talking to these people and realizing that, especially from the right angle, I was getting right leaning viewpoints from the left, which were completely misconstrued, especially if you go and talk to people who are on the right. And, I'm more of a moderate person, and I want to try and understand. But the key thing is that I had to stop listening to the mainstream media. But I wanted to also just ask the question, you know, why does it feel like they think we're stupid, or why does it feel like they feel the need to talk down to us? The whole thing with the vaccine mandates feels like they are talking down to us. If you don't agree with it, it's not a point of disagreement, it's a point of stupidity, right? And that's something different, and the media is pushing that. And it's insulting. I think there was a point in time where at least I felt like if the people you didn't disagree with, I'm sorry, the people that didn't agree with you, you at least would say, I don't agree with them, but I didn't necessarily think they were complete morons or they were backwards. But now it feels like the media is propagating this way of thinking. Um, I'll throw it to Batya. What do you have to say about that?
Something that I realized recently is I often think that when you look at the left versus the right in America, the right thinks that the left looks down on them and has contempt for them. And the left thinks that the right is completely racist. And one of those things is true. And it's not that the right is completely racist, right? Of the two myths of left versus right, I think that a lot of people on the left, and I'm on the left, have just insane amounts of contempt for people who are not college educated. And I think that stems from this sort of class divide in America that's really new and keeps getting more and more amped up, to where the Democrats have abandoned the working class and see their base as being people with a college degree. And I feel like in America right now, we've sort of replaced community and spirituality with information and knowledge. And that happened because our economy is working really well for people with very fancy college degrees and really poorly for the working class. And I argue in my book that that's by and large because journalists underwent a status revolution, essentially. So throughout the 20th century, journalism was a working class trade. It was like being an electrician or being a plumber. You didn't go to college to become a journalist. Most journalists didn't have a college degree, and they lived among the working class, and they lived like the working class. And so they really cared about the working class. And today, if you look at the class of journalists, the people who make up journalism, they are all extremely highly educated at these very fancy schools, which is ridiculous because you can't teach journalism. You can't teach someone how to be a good listener and how to question their biases. And so they got really highly educated, and then they got increasingly affluent. Journalists are now part of the top 10%. And as journalists are now part of the top 10%. And as they sort of ascended to the ranks of the American elites, they abandoned the working class that they used to belong to. And now they have huge amounts of contempt for them. And the reason, I think, Adam, to answer your question, the reason it feels like they're talking down to you is because they are. They're talking to each other. The journalism that we consume today, if you're not watching Fox News and you're not listening to talk radio, you're everything to the left of that, everything center left of that is produced by very highly educated, very affluent elites for very highly educated, affluent elites. And I'm not saying that because I think that a good education, you know, what from one of these fancy schools is actually a good education. I hope it's clear that I think that, you know, as somebody who's been through that whole education system, you know, I don't respect that education at all, you know, and I think that what it produces, it does not produce knowledge. It does not produce good journalists. It produces contempt. I mean, that is the thing that you learn when you go to these fancy schools, is to have contempt for your fellow Americans who don't agree with you. And so as the working class has been increasingly identified with conservatism and the Republican Party, because working class people, irrespective of who they vote for, irrespective of what their race is, tend to have more conservative social views, those views have become taboo among the people who claim to be on the side of the marginalized. That's kind of like my sort of long answer to your question. And I think it's really a disaster for America.
Wow. And you know what? The first thing that kind of comes to mind, because you said like they became like the affluent class. It reminds me at the very beginning of the pandemic. And I remember listening to people saying, oh, just work from home, right? And you're like, oh, just anybody can just work from home. I work in IT, and my company refuses to have me work from home, even though I can. So it's this idea that we're able to do it. Why can't you guys do it? You know, slow the spread. Just work from home. Don't leave your house. Order Uber Eats. You know, that kind of thing. And it's a completely different mindset than the average person who doesn't have that option. But like you said, they've kind of reached a different class, and they refuse to look at the people who are, you know, allegedly below them. But I'll go to the Mythinformed guys. What do you have to say about that?
So what we see is like an attack on what I call an acronym FRECKLE: family, religion, education, culture, and law. And those five, it seems like they're trying to, they want to subvert, or there's a force that seems to want to subvert all those. And we spend thousands of hours going through the internet, listening to these seminars of critical race theory and different parts in education and TikTok and all these places. And we see on the media them saying, this is not, critical race theory is not taught in K through 12. It's only taught in law schools. We're just teaching history. Yet we listen to these educators when they're talking, and they say just the opposite. They tell us, no, we are teaching critical race theory. Here's why. It's more than just history. They admit that it needs to be biased, and this is the point. And they go farther and even say, we want to take some of the parenting obligations away so we can do it. And this is the idea, is to document the kids' sexuality and stuff. And the idea is that, well, maybe at home their parents aren't open enough, and that we will be the open people. It's so weird, and it's so ideological, and it's obvious, and they will admit it. I mean, they talk openly about Paulo Freire and how they really need that these principles of education need to be in the law. So it's so opposite of what the media is saying, and that's the way we spend so much time documenting this on our website to prove it.
What I would say is, what I think the issue with the legacy media right now is the fact that they're flailing and they know it. Like, their numbers are down. That's why when someone like, you know, Joe Rogan comes out, challenges the narrative, they attack him, because they know, you know, independent media has really kind of filled the void for a lot of people. And the legacy media isn't as influential as it used to be. So they have to, you know, smear people. So I think a lot of people are waking up to like how bad the media actually is these days. So yeah, I mean, I think at one point in time they were a super important industry, and I think people have filled that gap lately.
I agree with you. I think more and more people are just like myself, who are waking up and seeing that something is off. You had mentioned critical race theory, and I noticed like a level of like snarky condescension, especially from someone, I'll just use a name, like Joyanne Reed. It was like, these stupid parents think that critical race theory is being taught there. as if like parents across the country, you guys are in Milwaukee, and I've met you guys in person, and I've spoken at a conference discussing critical race theory, right, along with James Lindsay. I've been blessed to have that opportunity to do so. These people aren't there because they turned on Fox News one night and they got scared. They're there because they see what's happening within their schools. They have legitimate concerns. They have paperwork. They see what's going on, what's being taught to their children, and there is zero interest to actually talk to these people, right? It's one thing to kind of think that, right? But you're a member of the media. You're supposed to find out, is this true? Is this the case? Is critical race theory actually being taught there? Well, let's talk to people who are actually at these schools where they're protesting, or actually at the schools where they're arguing with the school board. But it was just a level of contempt for these dumb parents who just don't want race to be taught in schools, or to discuss race in schools, or to talk about slavery in schools. And nobody has a problem with that. We've always talked about slavery, right? These aren't things that people have take issue to. And I just, that whole topic just felt like it was something that they always talked down upon, right? Not agreeing with, should we or should we not talk about this? They were gaslighting people, saying, this isn't even happening, you idiots, right? Stop watching Fox News, right? That was the level of contempt that was coming from smear merchants like Joanne Reed about this particular topic. But Edgar, do you I want to hear what you have to say?
Yeah, now that you mentioned critical race theory, we have to remember, I want to explain like a bit of what I think are some of the intellectual antecedents that created this sort of media manipulation. And as you mentioned, critical race theory has an important antecedent, which is the critical theory and postmodern neo-Marxism, like Foucault, Gilles Deleuze, Gianni Vattimo, and other authors. Gianni Vattimo, for example, says that truth is the enemy of democracy. Democracy is the reign of opinion. And you just impose your strong opinion through more or less subtle means. And it's the same that Michel Foucault says when he talks about discourse as a structure of power. It's just a way, there's no truth. You just have to, paint things in a way that people believes in your discourse, in your narratives and all that. And that is what we're seeing in the media. There's just a deep disdain for truth. And I already admit it. I know that journalists will not ever be completely 100% objective. I mean, in El American, we have a manifesto of what we believe in, and that's okay. But you can have a commitment to fairness. And journalists, liberal media in the last few years in the US haven't had a commitment to fairness. They haven't been fair, and they know they're not being fair. They've just become a partisan object for the progressive establishment, and they know it, and they don't care about it. It was a process that had been brewing for maybe even 40 or 50 years, but Donald Trump, the Trump presidency, just fast forwarded it.
That's actually something that I wanted to bring up, because it does feel like something. It went from being covert to overt, right? The level of disdain, especially for their hatred of Donald Trump coming into office, it almost felt like there was this disdain for the man, and that man gained power. So he only gained power because of these particular people who voted for him. And that level of disdain we have for that man is the same we have for basically half of the population of this country. And it became more and more obvious, more and more fervent of this disdain, calling people Trumpers, right? It's a level of animosity that I had never really experienced, even from someone who was on the left looking at people who were on the right. I never felt that before. I never seen that before. And I think I kind of bought into it a little bit in the beginning, I'll tell you this: the Robert Mueller investigation. I remember saying, "All right, well, let's see what comes out of this." And every day, for was it 2.5 years or something like that? I think it was almost 3 years. Um, Waiting for them to come out with the smoking gun to show that he was colluding with Russia, and it was nothing. And I remember them celebrating. It's about to happen. Robert Mueller is about to put him in jail, right? The Blue Anon conspiracy theory is about to come true. And what happens? Robert Mueller says nothing. And I remember specifically watching Joy on The View say, Joy Behar on The View, she said, well, Robert Mueller's a Republican anyways. What did you expect? And I remember thinking that's a huge pivot, you know, and it's a type of like propaganda where they just quickly moved on to the next thing that they hate this man for, instead of saying, oh, well, maybe we were wrong about this, right? And there's a level of unwillingness to say we could be wrong about this. You know, everybody is always right, and if we're not right, we'll just move it to the side anyways and keep on moving to the next thing. But anybody can kind of jump in there.
Well, Adam, I'm really interested in how you were able to have that like moment of honesty and see through it, because I have like liberal friends who still are making that pivot. Like every time you point out something to them that's like the media got wrong, there's always some excuse, you know, like you see it a lot. Like I'll just give you one example, is like with the Kyle Rittenhouse case, where I can't tell you how many times I've been out with like a liberal friend, or, you know, sitting next to someone on a plane talking about something, or just like in conversation with someone about it. And they'll say to me like, well, he killed 3 Black people. And I'll be like, no, he actually didn't. And then, you know, as soon as you say that to them, and these are people who follow the news, they'll be like, well, I haven't been following it too much. It's like, well, you were following it enough to be misinformed about it, right? You know, and there's just no moment of clarity that like you had, which is like, wait a minute, at some point so many things have gotten wrong that you start to question like the backbone or the underpinning of the worldview and the whole, you know, everything that's going on. So I'm so curious what is it about you that enabled you to see that and to have that kind of moment of critical thinking about yourself, to start questioning?
I actually wrote about it in my book. I mean, there were multiple nuggets that happened along the Trump presidency. And I know I keep bringing up Trump. I'm not some hardcore Trumper. I don't have a MAGA hat or anything like that. I'm just being objective. Trump was the president for 4 years, and a lot had happened in the media. But this is not bragging or anything. I'm just stating this. I was doing a lot of traveling throughout Europe the past 4 years or so. I was in Madrid, and I happened to meet a British guy who was living in Madrid, and we connected through football, and we just stayed in contact, and I would talk to him through WhatsApp. And one day he told me that he was for Brexit. And I said, that's interesting, you know, because one, I don't live in the country, but two, I thought Brexit was for these racist British people who don't want foreigners in their country. And I already had a level of good faith with him. He's been nothing but a nice person towards me. He's been nothing but cordial. So I had no reason to write him off or anything like that. So he basically almost said, like verbatim, that the United States would never allow an outside governing body to tell it what to do. And I'm like, that makes perfect sense. You know, that's a very reasonable thing to say, and understand why you want Brexit to happen. You don't want the EU to dictate how much your fishermen can fish and how far up they can go to catch fish, how many foreigners you let in, how many refugees you let in, to the point where you don't feel like a sovereign nation anymore. And that is considered a right-wing viewpoint. And I had never heard that viewpoint. And so from that period on, I would talk to him a little bit more about it. I would talk to him about Thomas Sowell. He was actually the one, a white British guy, introduced me to Thomas Sowell. And it was kind of from there, just finding out about different viewpoints, and just hearing out what made sense. But the more and more I opened up to this idea, the less and less I listened to the general media. I stopped turning on MSNBC. I stopped turning on CNN, and I don't even really watch Fox News because I don't think they're too different in a bunch of different ways. But I think that was one of the more significant moments for myself, to answer your question.
I had a quick question for the panel. Do you think Donald Trump's statements on his most recent statements on the vaccines is net positive or net negative?
If I was just to jump in here, and also Libby, I added you as a speaker. To be honest with you, and this is not coming from a place of animosity towards Trump or anything like that. I think the more that Trump speaks, the more it hurts what is happening for the right. I don't think he has anything useful to add, and I'll go as far as I don't think he should run for re-election. I think the purpose of him making it into office was to expose the establishment, right? And they exposed themselves, kind of mixing into the media manipulation part. They were so outraged that he won that they became overt in their behavior and all the things that they may have been doing. They just became abundantly overt in their behavior. And so now I think the purpose of having Donald Trump in office to give the common person some sort of voice, to advocate for certain things that maybe the average person actually wanted, to not allow another Clinton, Bush, Obama, the political royalty to get into office again. I think he served his purpose. I think he is too divisive of a person, and I don't think him running again would help at all. I think what it will do is gin up more divisiveness because his name is divisive. And I'm not even saying his behavior is divisive per se, but his name is tainted. And we need someone who is, from my perspective, we need someone who is moderately conservative, who is able to convey a message without allowing the media to completely manipulate what he's saying, right? Who won't say, maybe we need to put some bleach on the inside and have them misconstrued into being, the president wants you to drink bleach, right? Ron DeSantis wouldn't have said what he had said to have that being misused and let the media manipulate his words. So I don't know if I'm completely answering your question, but I don't think Donald Trump saying anything about the vaccines or anything politically is a net benefit right now at all.
I want to follow up you there, Adam. To answer the question, and I'm pretty much in the same position as you as regarding to Trump. I've never liked him much. I think he served a purpose, but I think it's positive that he says what he says about the vaccines, because I think that's the correct position. Being pro-vaccine, but against mandates. And even though we might consider him toxic, he still has an important political base that are quite vaccine hesitant and that need to listen to something that is not just you're an idiot for not receiving the vaccine. So I think that's positive. But now that you said that part of that we need someone who doesn't allow the media to manipulate what he says, and you mentioned DeSantis as an example, but I will mention something that happened to me personally with DeSantis. And it was that the recent decision of DeSantis to create a Florida State Guard that would handle disasters and stuff like that, and what did the Florida Democrats and the liberal media did? Charlie Crist literally said that it would be his secret police, like his Gestapo or something like that. Debbie Mucarsel-Powell compared it to the Venezuelan colectivos. For those who do not know what the colectivos are, they're basically paramilitary forces in Venezuela that kill students. My wife is an attorney and a human rights attorney, and she defended a case of a student that was raped by colectivos. They kill students. they murder people in poor areas, they torture, etc. And David Moncarcel Powell compared the colectivos to the Florida State Guard. I mean, even a guy like DeSantis that know how to handle the narrative and has someone like Christina Pushaw by his side, and that it's, you know, pretty much a regular conservative, still the liberal media is going to find a way to kind of manipulate what he's saying. And that happened in that case and has happened many times in 2021. That just a particular case. And it happened, you know, CNN, Axios, and other, The Hill, and other outlets pretty much reproduced this narrative that he was creating a paramilitary force that he could only control himself without outside from the federal government. I mean, that we have a guy like DeSantis doesn't mean he's going to be immune to media manipulation, I think.
Yeah, I think Trump coming out and saying his piece about vaccines makes an awful lot of sense. It was a big part of his legacy were the vaccines. He developed them with Operation Warp Speed. He worked really hard on that. And I think that it was a shame how quickly that became something that was sort of co-opted away from his legacy and from his administration. I also don't think that there's issues with the media, but I don't think that's the issue. I don't think the issue with misinformation is necessarily just the media. I think it has a lot to do with what people are, the way that people consume media, and they assume that if they get their information from just one source, that's going to be enough. And it isn't. You have to read widely. You need to think critically. And I think that blaming the media, we can do that, but it sort of ends up in a situation where then what are we doing? Are we begging for media regulation? I don't think any of us really want that in a free society where freedom of the press is paramount. I certainly don't want increased media regulation. And if you look back at the history of media in the United States, even looking back at, the time of the founding of the nation and after that, there were partisan newspapers. You knew what you were doing when you picked up a different newspaper, like the New York Post. You knew that was going to be different. You knew and we still know what we're getting when you pick up the New York Times. So understanding media bias and understanding what outlets you're looking at and what their perspectives are makes a lot more sense than just simply blaming media for misinterpreting things. Everyone out there is telling their own narrative. Every media outlet has a story that they're telling to their readers, and it's the story they think their readers want to hear. But readers need to look around and make sure that they're getting all the information. It's not up to any one individual outlet to make sure that their objectivity is paramount. And I think the place where that's really clear is in the changes that were wrought with the New York Times, which I used to thoroughly believe was all the news that was fit to print, until it became clear at a certain point, mostly in my case from reading Noam Chomsky, that it wasn't. And I started looking elsewhere and making sure that I was getting more than one perspective. That's what we need to do, not simply just blame, and I'm in the media, obviously, and not simply just blame media outlets for not giving what we think they should be delivering.
I agree with you. And you actually mentioned, going the path of regulation, and you mentioned the term misinformation, which I think is a term that is overly used, and it's to the point where it's used as a slander, right? There's true and false, there is opinion, there is fact, but misinformation is used for all different types of things. It could be used for things you don't agree with, but it's a word that's constantly misused, and also it's a word that's used to have corporations like Twitter and Facebook to enforce fact checking, even on opinions.
And what's interesting about that is the people who are doing that enforcement. It's an open secret that the people who are in positions of power at big tech companies making these decisions, dealing with these algorithms, it's not like they went to university and studied humanities and have a wide understanding of, you know, philosophy and how to consider these things. In a lot of ways, you know, they were reared on the same kind of progressive indoctrination as people are finally fighting back against now. Wait 1 second. Charlie, honey, no chocolate right now. Okay, I'm making dinner. Sorry, guys. Yeah, so that's what I'm doing right now.
Super mom,
hilarious.
you're a super mom.
Yeah.
Super mom Libby.
But I think that, you know, I think that's part of it. They don't know what misinformation is because they don't know what information is. They know what they're supposed to do with the algorithms. They have a very limited understanding of basic concepts, and they're not actually accurate with regard to figuring out opinion versus fact. And so many of the facts we get now are actually opinions. We even see that overwhelmingly with the president and his administration. How many times did you hear that if you get vaccinated, you don't have to wear a mask? And if you get vaccinated, you can't spread the virus? And then we hear that you can, and there's still no real accurate data or you know, or procedures coming out of the White House. They change their mind constantly. Yet the president saying that if you have the vaccine, you can't spread the virus, that wasn't labeled as misinformation at all. Why not? Because they just believed the president, because they're not looking at this with a, you know, some sort of metric or baseline way to make decisions. You know, they're not looking at it that way.
Well, I think one clarifying point on what Trump was saying about the vaccines. What he's saying is, look, he's pro-vaccine. Obviously, he wants to take credit. His administration created it. You know, it's like a big thing for him. But what he is against are the vaccine mandates. And Libby, I was excited to talk to you to see like what's going on in New York. I mean, like
Hey,
we're
Sean,
seeing people.
I miss you guys.
Yeah, I miss you too, Libby.
It's ridiculous.
Yeah,
What's going on in New York?
haven't
Well, I
invited
can
us.
tell you. So it turns out now police are being called in to enforce vaccine mandates, and they're actually doing it. No, I'm not telling him. Oh, you want me to tell him about the Popeyes? Okay, I'll tell him about the Popeyes. Yeah, so police are being called in to enforce these vaccine mandates. They're actually doing it. They're saying that people are trespassing. I asked a guy that I know on the force about it, and he was like, well, you know, they got to do their job. And I'm like, really, mofo? This is your job? Telling people they can't eat at the Applebee's? I talked to a mom today who was kicked out of an Applebee's last month with her 5-year-old after they went to try and protest the vaccine mandates. You can't do much. So if you show up at a restaurant, or movies, or like literally anywhere, they make you show your vaccine card. Some places are going so far as to only allow the Excelsior app, which is this stupid garbage app that Andrew Cuomo created, where you can upload your medical information to the database and then everybody can have it and you can show it. So you have to show your little vaccine card or this app in some places, and you have to show your ID as well to do that. And my son, who is asking me to tell you guys this story, recently went after school with his friend. What friend? It doesn't matter. With his friend Juan. And they went to the Popeyes to get some chicken sandwiches. New Popeyes opened up near school. It's been very exciting, you know, to have a Popeyes. So anyway, they go in to get their chicken sandwiches. They order, they sit down, and the lady is like, no, you can't sit here if you can't sit here unless you show your vaccine card. My son hasn't been vaccinated. He's little. He's in middle school. He's fine. Neither had his friend been vaccinated. So they ended up wandering around in the freezing park near our house, eating their chicken sandwiches. They have to eat outside at lunch. Are you guys allowed to eat inside at lunch ever?
Unless you don't have your own lunch.
Okay. If you don't have your own lunch, I guess you can eat inside. Is that right? Weird.
Yeah,
anyway.
But if you have your own lunch outside with you.
You have your own lunch. You have to go eat. You have to go eat outside. Okay. Yeah. So that's what's going on. You can't go to the movies. So we are now like sort of just inside. We don't really have anything to do. And also the stores have gone back to requiring everyone to wear masks because stupid Kathy Hochul said on Twitter that shops could require vaccines or masks, and people took her tweet as actual governance. I actually talked to someone in city council who was, and I was like, what is the backup for the vaccine mandates that the cops are enforcing? Is there some law? And the city councilman was like, nope, there's no law. This is executive orders from the governor and the mayor. Nothing like this has even been broached in city council, never mind been voted on or passed. So we are being masked and vaccinated. We are being forced to show our papers literally without representation. There's no one we can talk to about it. There's like very little recourse. People have been protesting. It doesn't really make national news. Because what? Because we're New Yorkers. We show up and then they tell us to leave and then a couple people get arrested. No one cares. We've kind of like made our own bed and we are lying in it here. And so, yeah, so that's what's going on. It sucks. I hate it.
Wow. I know we talked about this the other weekend.
Right, when we were in
it's
Phoenix, we talked about this.
yeah, and I feel bad. I feel bad that you guys are going through this particular situation. My wife, she works in Manhattan, and she was basically forced to get the vaccine or lose her job. And it's not
Yeah, this weekend we're going to New Jersey so that we can go to the movies. Yeah, we're like very excited. We're gonna go to Jersey. We're gonna go to a classic Jersey diner. We're gonna go to the movies. It's gonna be a great day.
It's just it's crazy that they don't understand that this is modern day segregation. And as soon as you point that out, people freak out, But you're literally arresting people for not having a vaccine. It's
Well, there was a
separate
word
but
on
not
the
equal.
internet. Somebody said, I can't remember who to credit, but they said the best way to call this, the best way to define it is vaccine apartheid.
Yeah.
And that's appropriate because
that's
you're not
pretty good.
allowing these people
That's right.
into society. And
Wow.
and one of the things when we covered Michelle Wu in Boston talking about the one that they're going to roll out, right? And they call it the
Chicago.
Be Together in Boston, which is the most ironic
It's so
name.
Orwellian. It's so Orwellian.
I know. But what was
insane.
the good thing about this, in my opinion, was when we first listened to it, we're like, what is all this noise? Right? There's whistles.
Yeah.
People are making tons and tons of noise. And she can't hear when the reporters are trying to ask questions. Like she literally has to get off of the stage and talk to them because the crowd's so loud, humiliating them.
Yeah.
And I think that's super important because she herself said, like, for enforcement, when this becomes normalized in the culture, it's so much easier to enforce. So I think that on all these petty authoritarian pieces that no, you must resist. The people that are filming that 5-year-old kid getting thrown out of the restaurant, and that woman is saying, "Is this why you wanted to go to police school? Was this your dream?" Right. That can help.
But it's also like the optics, Libby. Like the NYPD is not, it wanes and people liking them. And when they have 20 cops show up to arrest one family, it's like, first of all, with how much crime is happening in New York, there's bigger fish to fry. It's crazy, man. Like they don't even understand the optics.
Yeah, no, they have no idea. And it was a protest. I talked to the mom with that 5-year-old today, and she was part of a protest. She's a teacher. She's a 10th grade global history teacher, and she is on unpaid leave because she didn't want to get the vaccine for religious reasons. I didn't press her as to what those are because this is America, and if you have a religious reason for something, that's up to you. That's totally your call, per our founding documents. So yeah, I didn't press her on that, but there were multiple people there. This was a protest. It was intentional to, you know, expose the injustice. And I really respect that. You know, I feel so useless about my contribution. I write about this stuff. But I'm not, you know, when somebody says, show your vaccine card or leave, I either leave or show my vaccine card. You know, I kind of wish I never got the vaccine so that I wouldn't have the option of showing the card and just capitulating to it. But you know, one of the biggest reasons I'm against authoritarianism is because I'm going to get crushed. You know, I'm not out there in the street fighting stuff. You know, I'm imminently crushable, as so many of us are. And yeah, that's what's going on.
I think the booster is the next big question. Who's going to get the booster? Because yeah, you have people that are vaccinated now, but those vaccines are almost up. Now the next question is who's going to get boosted. I think that's going to be a big question.
Yeah, I'm totally not getting. I'm sorry about the. I have to wash this pan. I'm totally not getting boosted at all. I'm not doing that. I had COVID. I got it from Tim Pool. Like, I'm not playing around now. I'm done. That's it.
So I guess my question is, you know, we talk about the different issues that are happening within the media, but what can the average person do as far as avoiding, let's say, a level of manipulation, or to look out for false narratives? You know, to look out for, let's say, an article that has some truth to it, but it's slanted in a direction that's misleading. Batya, what do you think?
It's such a great question. I will say I too think that the given the preponderance of people of color who are not vaccinated, the vaccine mandate is really, I think, actually quite racist. But at the same time, I really think it's gross when people go to restaurants without being vaccinated and insist on their right to be there, because essentially what they're doing is forcing working class people to bear the brunt of their culture war. And while I happen to agree with them on the culture war, like asking somebody at a hostess at Applebee's and then a police officer to be the people forced to, you know, arrest you for doing that, I think that that's really I think that's pretty low. Like, I don't think those people are heroes at all. Just to throw that in there. In terms of resisting narratives, you know, I think we're seeing right now a mass consumer boycott of the news. And I think that's a great thing. I think people are really sick of it and they're just consuming less news. And that's the number one thing you can do, is just consume less news. There's nothing that you need to know that's on CNN today. I mean, if you want to know if there's, you know, if we're back in lockdown, if you won't, you know, walk to the corner store, walk to the bodega, they'll tell you, you know, like there's nothing you need to know that you can get from CNN or the New York Times that you can't get from your community. And like I said, I think we've replaced like community and spirituality with information, and it's information we don't need. And so that's the number one thing is, you know, stop reading so much news. And I'd say the second thing is remember what it feels like to respect people you disagree with, because that's really how we resist this. Like, the polarization that exists in this country is a completely elite phenomenon. It exists in the chattering class and in the political class because they're literally making money and getting power off of trying to convince us that we're divided, and we're just not. Like, if you go to church, if you go to synagogue, if you go volunteer, you know, at your local soup kitchen, you'll find people across the political aisle who you agree with on so many things. And that's really the most important thing, is remembering what it means to be an American and what it means to be part of a body politic and a nation, and to respect people that you don't agree with, because that is literally what a democracy is. And the elites who are making bank off of making us forget that, we can't allow them to get away with that. And, you know, each of us is completely empowered to resist that. And I think one great way to do it, I'll just end with that, is, you know, when you're online, when you're scrolling through social media, when you're on Twitter or Facebook and you see something that makes you feel totally enraged, somebody's making $1 million every time you feel that way. They've really hacked our hearts. And you can train yourself to resist that. You can train yourself to not allow people to make millions of dollars off of making you hate your fellow American, who actually you have more in common with than you would ever think.
Okay. Edgar.
Yeah, I think that one important thing that I'd say is that not everything has to be about politics, and I come from a highly politicized society like Venezuela, where everything is about politics, you know. But as Badia just said, you know, when everything turns into politics, everything turns into conflict, and someone is making a lot of money and earning something from that, and you don't need to become like part of that vicious cycle. Don't turn everything into politics. You know, it's fine to just uninstall Twitter sometimes and just forget about it. And on the other hand, I'd say that stop listening to the liberal media all the time. There are still valuable people working in the liberal media. There are still some valuable things from the liberal media, but you know, maybe sometimes alternative media or alternative writers that are also appearing, such as American. Sorry for the moment of publicity here, but are also worth a read and will also help you form your own criteria. I remember that Ben Shapiro once said that, you know, we have to forget about objectivity. If you want to objectivity, just grab an article from the Daily Wire and an article from the Huffington Post, and whatever that it matches between both articles, it's what the facts that happen. The rest is just interpretation, and it's okay to admit that we cannot be 100% objectives. But those of us who work in the media, maybe we cannot be objective, but we can be fair, and we have to strive to be fair and to be able to hold civil conversations, you know, because if we don't, we're going to break society more than it is, you know. And I don't like comparisons between Venezuela and the United States, but Venezuela pretty much started by that, you know, by destroying the possibility of having a civil conversation, of disagreeing honestly, of disagreeing, you know, of just being able to speak and saying, well, maybe we don't agree with this, but we don't have to kill ourselves over that, you know. And that was how everything started here. And I don't want that to happen to the US too. You know, I have a lot of respect for the US. I have a lot of people that I love in the US. And I'm seeing a lot of things that I saw in Venezuela 10 years ago, or that I read about 20 or 30 years ago, that I think are pretty bad for the society. And we cannot let that happen.
Okay. Mythinformed guys.
So
hey Edgar, what's your opinion on the term Latinx?
I hate it. It sounds like a cheap porn site, and it's awful. I've never heard a person that speaks Spanish using it. Maybe two people that actually speak Spanish using it. It's awful. But you know, like Napoleon said, if the enemy is making a mistake, don't correct them. Let them use it. I mean, all Latinos hate it.
it's funny. I mean, every video that we watch, they always, to a fault, use Latinx. I think they have to. I guess our concern is like the radicalization of the kids. It seems like we want to muzzle the adults by putting these restrictions on them, like making woke stuff at work. Like I wrote up a piece on Intuit about all of this anti-racist culture at work, and the CEO, that one of the talking points was, if you are allowed to have a different opinion than our CEO, but just don't share it. See, that's an attempt to muzzle the adults and make them feel like, well, if I lose my job, I can't care for my kids. But then at the same time, they're radicalizing the kids by saying, you know, you got to understand that your people of color, your fellow students that are people of color get racism every day. They just assert this without evidence, and there's this attempt to radicalize the kids, and if you don't buy into this, then you're a bad person. That is an awful recipe, and that's why we're doing what we're doing, and just constantly putting this stuff out there to say, look, this isn't right-wing narrative. This is happening. This is the teachers' education meetings.
Yeah, I think what seeing like celebrities being more willing to, you know, put their quote unquote brand out there, I think that's actually having a really positive effect. I think I don't know if you guys, Libby, did you watch the Sex and the City show in the 90s?
No, actually, I recently had nothing to watch, and so I was talking to my brother, and I was like, "Hey, I'm going to watch this Sex in the City, the old one," and he was like, "Oh, you are going to hate it so much." And I watched 2 episodes, and I just wanted to throw it out the window. I hated it so. I never watched it, and I hate it
now.
now.
We're deciding to watch the Xbox.
Oh, stop! I hated
The
it.
X-Files. Yeah,
We're going to watch the Xbox documentary later, so that's what we're going to do.
Well, but the '90s version of like Sex and the City was very in your face. It was very, willing to cross the line as far as like say things that are outrageous. And then when you watch the reboot and you see all the like literal like obvious
It's woke AF.
wokeism,
Mhm.
wokeisms put into it, it's like God, and it's so funny. Like even so, like I know people that watch in the '90s, and they would be like more progressive liberals today, like '90s progressives. And now they watch that show, and they're like, it's so overt that it kind of like it red pills them a little bit. Like it's just them a little bit. Like it's just a little bit of the red pilling where it's like, yeah, you see kind of how annoying and over the top that stuff is. And
Okay, I'm sorry, I have to disagree a little bit. I think that it's actually a send up of wokeness. Like every woke moment is showing how stupid wokeness is, and I don't think that's an accident. Like I think that that's the whole point is like it's showing you how ridiculous it is. Sorry, just a counter interpretation of the reboot.
oh, have you seen the reboot?
Yeah.
Oh, so okay, so what I'm looking at is okay, obviously the scene with Miranda and her professor where she's like the typical Karen who doesn't know how to talk to a black person essentially. I mean that's like honestly like if
But they're totally making there's a scene where Miranda
yeah, I know.
she makes the scene worse, and then she literally says, "But I read in How to Be an Anti-Racist that I'm supposed to do this and this." Like they're making fun of people like that. They're not on the side of it.
Thank you, Batya. That's what I thought when Sean first shared the clip with me. I thought this was just a
I
skit.
don't know. All right. So that's one scene. The other scene, I'm sorry, I don't want to make this about Sex in the City, but I haven't really heard a good breakdown of this yet. There's another scene where it's who's the brunette? What's her name?
Charlotte.
Charlotte and Harry, her husband, are going to a dinner where it's all black people, right? It's like all the couples are black people, and she's like grilling him on who the black authors are, and he needs to know this and what's wrong with him, and they need to have more than one. They need to have more than one black friend in their circles. It's like way over the top, and I was
Yeah,
like,
you guys, Charlotte is the butt of that joke. Like that is not an instruction on how to be a good liberal. That's making fun of today's liberalism. It was totally brilliant.
Wow,
right,
maybe it is. And the joke's going right over their head. Maybe that's the best way to do it.
You might change my mind on this. I've been very hard on the Sex and the City reboot.
Well, I didn't expect this to happen.
Look at this, changing minds already.
You changed.
All right. Well, I guess we're kind of come to a point where we allow, if people want to say their piece, if they want to ask a question or just make a statement, they could do so. Just send a request. My only thing is try to go straight to the point, because there are going to be multiple people who want to say something, and we'll respond to it and we'll just go from there. Does anybody on the panel have to jump off or anything like that? Do you have a little bit more time?
I've got about 10 more minutes.
Okay.
Yeah, me too. I basically just have to finish making dinner and then I have to eat it. So.
Okay. All right, we'll try and do this relatively quick. So we'll go to David Bobbitt. I'm going to add you as a speaker. Oh, David.
Yes, thank you, Adam. I'll make 2 quick points. I think Adam's point earlier about Trump serving his purpose is a really valid point. That whole thing of him getting elected in 2016 was kind of a fluke, but people saw the media attacking him so much. And I think that's actually what helped him win, because they just went after him so much, and people said, wow, they hate this guy, therefore we're going to vote for him. They're showing us he's the anti-establishment candidate. But I agree with you. I think he served his point, served his purpose. A second point I would like to make, and just a side note, this is a great discussion. I love this topic. It's hard to think of anything to add to what you've already said, but one point that has been made is the way the media has transitioned and changed really over 50, 70 years. It's gone from being a blue collar profession to a white collar profession, and they mostly look down on working class people. But I would like to add one point, and I think that is that the fragmentation of the media, the way the technology environment has changed, and this has been going on for a number of decades, of course, but now with Twitter and Facebook and social media and the internet, those legacy media companies are really being challenged, and as someone pointed out, they're losing audience, and we've got a chance to challenge them, to challenge their narrative. We can now go online and find the videos ourselves. One of the ways I called NPR lying so much is they would report something, and I would just go and Google the video and find the video, and I'd realize, oh, they lied about that. They took that out of context. I finally had to stop listening to NPR for the most part for the news programs, because it just called them lying so much. And it's an important topic. It's just terrible what is happening to our media. You cannot have a democracy without an informed citizenry, and we're really in I think a really pivotal point. And I think just as Trump kind of revealed the problems in the media back when he was elected and during his presidency, now this COVID crisis has revealed the gap between the elite and the people. And it's very, very clear the media is part of the elite. And I think most people have not realized, and I did not realize until recently, how much the media has been bought. They're part of corporate America, and they can't. CNN and all of these news organizations, they're part of big media conglomerates. They cannot function without the advertising and support of the pharmaceutical industry and these big media, big corporations. The owners of those other corporations also are the owners of the companies that own CNN and NBC and all of that, and they're just bought. They're owned now, and more and more people are waking up to that. But we need the American people to see that, to learn critical thinking, to learn to think for themselves, to watch and read these media reports, these news reports, much more critically. And thanks for letting me participate. This is a great discussion. I really, really enjoy you guys. Thank you.
Thank you, David. Does anybody want to make a comment based off what he's saying?
I just really appreciate everything you said, David. I agree with it so much. And I also agree with you about the power of the American people. I just think we're too smart for this. Americans are too smart for this. And I think that we're going to see a pivot. I completely agree with you.
All right. Do you guys want to? Oh, Libby, you want to say something?
Oh no, I agree as well with the idea about the intelligence of the American people. I think too often we allow ourselves to be talked down to by whoever it is that's doing the talking down, and we have to remember that we are a pretty well educated, intelligent populace, and we know bullshit when we see it. So I think that's a really fair point.
I just wanted to say hi to Barrett. I see Barrett in the chat. Hey Barrett, how's it going? Hey, I have bold prediction right here. Ready? Donald Trump sits down with Joe Rogan, does a 3-hour interview. DeSantis signs on, vice president. Trump wins, landslide. Done.
And you're crazy.
I don't think Trump should run again. I think he has the opportunity to be a kingmaker, and he ought to take it.
I think don't you think he would his endorsements don't mean something? I mean, say he didn't run, don't you still want him in your corner? I mean, I think that's where the conversation is right now. If he doesn't run. I think a lot of people think he's going to run.
Yeah, I'm pretty sure he's gonna. I'm pretty sure he's gonna. He's
You think
gonna
he's
run.
going to go for it?
Yeah.
He does seem like he really wants a little bit more approval, doesn't he?
Yeah. I mean, he's the type of person who doesn't like to lose, and the fact that he did lose doesn't sit well with him. But
Batya, do you think it's okay to call like some of the New York Times and Washington Post like state media yet, or am I going too far?
Yeah, I wouldn't call them state media. I mean, I think like Edgar, I resist comparisons between America and, extreme things like Nazi Germany in the 1930s or, like Putin's Russia or the CCP. Like you want to see state media go to China, right? Like as long as there's no gun, like that's the thing that's so difficult about this is nobody's putting a gun to their head and being like, report in a woke way that will alienate the entire working class of all races, right? Like it's for internal pressures, like a combination of being high on their own virtue, of truly hating racism and truly wanting to see a more just and equitable America. And then, of course, their own economic interests, which drives a lot of the conversation around, for example, immigration. So I think that it's really not about, if like state media implies that like you're going to prison if you oppose the state. And I think it's extreme. It's not just like, it's not just, I find that disrespectful to people who are actually victims of, one party rule and actually victims of places where there's no rule of law and stuff like that. So no, but I don't have a lot of respect for what the New York Times has done with its, considerable power. And honestly, I do think that a lot of the contempt is driven by, or in this very back and forth relationship with the fact that the liberal media does know that it has lost the ability to influence. It has lost power in a way that they look at the right-wing media, the conservative media that has a much more symbiotic relationship with its actual readers and viewers. And, I don't know if it has a better ability to influence, but it reflects better where the people are at. And I think there's a lot of jealousy about that. And I agree with what everyone has said about Trump. Like, I think he revealed something so important about the divide in America. And that divide, of course, always comes back to the media.
right. I know we're running a little bit on your time, Batya and Libby. Do you have to go?
Oh, me, I have a couple more minutes.
Okay. What about you, Libby? You have you can stay on for one more question.
Yeah, I could do one more question, and then I gotta go.
Okay. Isaiah was here, but he had dropped off. So I'm gonna go to longtime listener Goldie. Goldie, you can unmute yourself now.
Thanks. Yeah, sorry. It always takes mine a while to load, but thanks for the space. And Mike, I had a question for Libby, since she said she's in New York City. How long do you think like the restaurant scene and like kind of the entertainment scene can last with all these vaccine passports? Like, are there actually enough people to support them without the people that can't go in?
Yeah, it turns out most of us are really compliant, and we just do what we're told. So yeah. A lot of places have closed, but they were closed before. The restaurant and bar scene took a really major hit during the pandemic when people couldn't go out. But yeah, so we also have a lot of empty storefronts. A lot of the city economically has, has been hit pretty hard. But I don't think, call me an optimist, but I don't think this is the end of New York by a long shot. I New York is I love this city, and I think we're going to be okay eventually. Yeah, and there are places that are fighting back. We went to a diner that didn't ask for vaccine card recently, and then I saw the owner of that diner on the news, and she was like, "No, I won't do it. I won't ask for people's vaccine cards." And I was like, "Okay, nice. I'm gonna come back here every time now, because I approve of that. Even though I'm vaccinated, I approve of not demanding people's medical status before you let them eat in your restaurant. I also, like, I've been careful. When I got COVID, I didn't travel, so." I think people can be respectful and careful without being treated like babies. But yeah, I think New York is going to be okay. I think the restaurant scene will eventually pop back. It'll be different, but it always is. New York is different for every generation that loves it.
Okay.
Adam, I gotta run, but thank you
Yeah.
so much for this, and thank you to all my fellow panelists and all of you who showed up. This was really such a blast. Thank you so much.
Fantastic.
Thank you. Libby,
Yeah.
we're gonna wrap up here. So do you have any final words?
Yeah. I'd love to tell you guys about the Post Millennial, which is where I'm the editor. We've been attacked by Antifa mobs who don't like that we practice independent journalism, don't like that we write about Antifa and the crimes that they commit. And, I'd love your
They don't
support.
like what you tell the truth.
My goodness, child. My goodness. I will be with you in a moment. My son doesn't like that I'm on the phone. Surprising. Anyways, I'd love for you guys to come check out the Post Millennial and see what we've been up to. You can donate there. You can help us out. You can read our stories. You can share them.
I think it's fantastic that you guys have stuck by Andy, because those that have known Andy know, like, you've known him a long time. We've known him a long time. We know Andy knows just like a journalist. That's who he is, right?
He's a crime reporter, and so criminals don't like when he reports on crime. They don't like that.
I know, and the way they like go after him and go after his sponsors and stuff, it's absolutely insane. It's just nuts. So that's awesome. You guys stick by him. And Barrett. And hi to Lisa. I saw Lisa. Lisa's in the channel too.
Oh, hi, Lisa. I have to jump off and get dinner on the table here. But thank you so much, Adam. I really appreciate being asked to join in.
No.
Have a good night, Libby.
Thanks. Bye, guys.
Good night. Bye.
Have a good one. All right, Mythinformed guys, you have final words?
Yeah, I would just say, if you guys, if you want to check out when we spend hours and hours and hours, thousands of hours digging through this stuff. So if you want to see in their own, yeah, it is.
It's not
it is. In their own words, and you actually want to see what the educators and the folks are talking about, and this is also HR representatives and so on and so forth. I mean, check out our Mythinformed MKE Twitter, or go to the YouTube. We upload them all there too. And that's just Mythinformed MKE on YouTube, and you can see for yourself what they're talking about, because it's one thing to have a bias, but it's another thing to talk right in their own words. So that's what we do.
Well, I think Edgar brought up having civil discussions. We actually have another event coming up. We're doing Fort Worth again because I love Fort Worth. Fort Worth is fantastic. Texas is awesome. And it's cool because Elijah's there, Sydney's there, a bunch of Blaze people are there. So it's really cool doing it in that area.
What Sean's talking about is we hold an event called Better Discourse,
yes,
where we bring in people from the right and the left that are willing to talk, partisans that are willing to talk about hot button issues.
Yeah, and are the conversations always perfect? No. But we got to have these conversations. And, you see, like, I got my mind changed tonight on Sex and the City. I have to now go and rewatch Sex and the City and figure out, okay, was I being too critical? Because I might have been. So yeah, but yeah, check that out. April, Better Discourse should be fun. Lisa will be there. Barrett's going to be there. A lot of people in this chat are going to be there. It'll be a fun time.
All right, thank you guys. And you guys know how to reach me in case you want someone who's objective to join the panel. Just putting that out there.
Want you there, man. It's a good time.
Yeah, the question is, so if we're doing this in April, is critical race theory still going to be a topic? That's the big question.
Yes.
And that's what I was going to ask Christina, because obviously DeSantis ran on a lot of the critical race theory stuff. So it's like one of those, like, you know, what's going to be a hot topic?
It's everywhere. I mean, there's a big question right now whether or not the Republican governor Virginia Youngkin is going to actually, you can stop CRT, but it can get in through the back door with
which we've still
social emotional learning, the school to prison pipeline. There's so many other ways that could get it in. So you know, if those things don't hold up, then yeah, this is going to still be a big topic.
Yeah, so we're always talking about topics.
So yeah, anyone that thinks, we're definitely take suggestions on topics too.
Okay, and Edgar, do you have any final words?
Well, thank you very much for the invitation, Adam. It was a great time to be here. Just follow El American, because we're doing great job for the Latino community, spreading the freedom message there. And you know, now that the trend is shifting with Latinos in the U.S., Latinos are more conservative now than 10 years ago, or at least more openly so. Now the Democratic Party and the liberal establishment and the liberal media is trying to silence voices as ours. They suspended our YouTube channel for a few days, then our Twitter account, and we're pretty much shadow banned on some social media and on some social networks and all that. So because, you know, they're saying, as AOC mentioned in an interview a couple of weeks ago, that, you know, there's a lot of misinformation in Spanish. So that's the next crusade that I think that the liberal establishment and the liberal media is going to pursue, which is conservative information in Spanish, because they know that Latinos are consuming more alternative media and need this alternative media to be also in Spanish. And El American is one of the few outlets that's reaching them in their own language. So that's going to be a next fight, and it's already starting. And well, if you can support us there, you know, follow us, share our content, tip in also, that would be awesome. And thank you very much, Adam, and all of you guys here.
Thank you, Edgar. And my final words are, you know, I think it was stated before, turn off the news, start talking to people. For people who were listening in the beginning, you know, one of the things that woke me up to how the media was not giving me a full picture, especially the mainstream media was not giving me a full picture about, let's say, right-leaning policies, was talking to someone, having a good faith conversation with someone, and being open to being wrong. And I think a lot of the discussions that we should be having amongst each other, we're allowing pundits on television to have these conversations for us. And then we're just nodding our heads and just repeating what we're hearing. And I know I've been guilty of that before, but I try not to be guilty of that today. I'm highly skeptical of all news sources. I'm highly skeptical on the right and the left. And I have my biases, but I think we all do. We all have our own perspective when it comes to information, how we interpret things. But I think it's incredibly important that we have to be open to being wrong. Otherwise, we're just constantly worried about being right. You know, feeling right, not necessarily even being right, just feeling right, always feeling morally correct. But that doesn't help the discourse. It doesn't help the discussion. And I think it allows for us to constantly be vulnerable to the media manipulating us by being so partisan, by only hearing one viewpoint. You know, with Mythinformed, they're trying to have better discourse. They're trying to have people on the left and on the right have a conversation about certain things, so we can understand that maybe we are misinterpreting something from either side. And I think that happens a lot. And the more you become skeptical of the information, you start seeing that more and more often. So I think overall what I'm trying to say is turn off the news, be skeptical of all the information that you take in, even if it's on your quote unquote side, and be willing to be wrong. Simple as that. And I think that will solve a lot of issues between each other. So between all of us, I should say. One last thing I'll say is we have these conversations every Wednesday, 7:30 p.m. Eastern Standard, on Twitter Spaces. I'm putting up the replays on our YouTube channel. It's called The Good Faith Space. You can get there by going to agoodfaithspace.com. It'll bring you right to the YouTube channel. So you can listen to previous conversations. We're trying to keep it somewhat up to date from the previous week. So if you miss a conversation, at some point we'll have it posted up on there. So once again, thank you for the panel. Thank you for everybody who's come here and listened to just talk nonsense about the media and how we feel about it. And thank you all for once again joining us and considering what we have to say. And thank you again to the panel, Libby, Batya, the Mythinformed guys, and Edgar. Thank you guys for coming on.
Yeah, thanks for inviting us, man. It's fun.
Thank you very much.
It's a great
Thank
time.
you. And I will try and feel better. I think I got the coof. Who knows? But no ventilator.
There's treatment for that.
You gotta get us banned.
There's treatment for that. Hopefully we don't get kicked off of Twitter for saying that.
No, I'll be fine.
Some good stuff out there.
I'll be fine. I got a sexy deep voice in the meantime. That's all.
I can feel it over here.
Yeah. But thank you once again. Thank you, everybody. Join us next week. Different topic, different people. And we'll talk to you guys soon. Have a good night.